In a world filled with noise and uncertainty, tune into the Voice of Reason with Chaplain Ingrid Gentles every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us for uplifting conversations, inspiring stories, and biblical insights that will empower you to navigate life challenges with faith and confidence, where faith meets reality. Join the conversation on HGG Radio, live on YouTube, and social media. Don't miss it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning into the Voice of Reason. I am Chaplain Ingrid Gentles, and I am your host for today. Yes, I am. And our topic for today is parents, children, and favoritism. Parents, children, and favoritism. If you are a parent or soon to be a parent or want to be a parent at some point in your life, stay tuned because this discussion is tailored just for you. The family dynamics can be quite complicated when you are dealing with multiple children with different personalities, with different temperaments, and with different needs. Therefore, parenting, especially in a large family, can be quite challenging. Yes, it can. There are no manuals, specific manuals to address the unique needs of each child in a home. You are learning on the fly as a parent. You are learning as you are going. So I'm going to pose some challenging questions as it relates to parenting multiple children in the same household. And as I'm going along, you will be able to recognize or see yourself in one or two of the examples that I'm going to be bringing forward in the questions that I'm going to be posing towards you. So then after that, once we've gone through these questions, then we're going to be going back and looking at some biblical examples relating to these types of parenting questions. All right, so why don't we get started? First question I have for you is, as a parent, have you ever been accused by another child of favoring one child over the other? As a parent, have you experienced that from a child, saying that mom, you or dad, you're showing favoritism, right? When actually the actual thing is, it's the way you are showing up for each child that is noticeable, that is different, right? You know, each child has a different need, right? And as a parent, we are going to show up for that child based on the need, based on their personality, based on their temperament, who they are. No child share the same parental experience equally. That is definitely correct. No child shares the same parental experience equally. And I'm talking about the overall parenting experience, right? Not if, if I've often heard, if it's one banana, everyone gets an equal share of that banana. That's not what I'm talking about. No. Children have different needs. They have different personalities. They have different temperament. And as a parent, we need to recognize our children, how uniquely different they are, and we will respond to them, or we should respond to them based on their uniqueness, based on their personality, and based on their needs, right? We are going to respond to them based on these different things that are showing up, right? So no children will ever share the same parental experience equally. That's not going to happen. Next question. Do you believe that you love your children equally? Parents, mom and dad, do you believe that you love your children equally? Love should not be the question here. I believe every parent loves their children no matter what, even though sometimes it may not seem that way. Every parent should love their children no matter what. But again, here we go. The way we show up for each child may look different to the other child or the other children looking on, right? Or even family members looking on, right? How we relate to each child, right, is being observed by the other children and also the other family members, even friends, possibly, right? Different doesn't always mean we love you less or we love you more. Difference doesn't always mean that we love you less or we love you more. Doesn't always mean that. Do you compare your children as parents? Do you compare your children? Parents, do we compare our children? Well, I'm a parent, so I have to also think about this question as I'm posing these questions. Well, comparison are sometimes unavoidable when you have children with different temperaments and different personalities. You know, people say, oh, I don't compare my children, I don't do this. You know what? That's sometimes unavoidable, right? And if we're going to be honest in the conversation as parents, we need to be honest within ourselves, right? Not to say to a child, right? However, sometimes you might hear a parent say, maybe it's a slip, maybe it's a moment in time, why can't you be responsible like your brother or your sister? I don't have to tell him or her to do their schoolwork. Why can't you be like your brother and sister? I don't have to tell him or her to do their schoolwork. And if you don't say it aloud, you may be thinking it, parents. What we need to understand as parents is that communication is not only verbal. Children can read your body language. They can read your disapproval. They can read your disappointments. So whether we are saying it aloud or whether we're saying it in our actions, the message is sometimes being conveyed and perhaps sometimes even being misinterpreted. Do you relate to one child more easily than you do to the other child? Do you relate to one child more easily? Gender differences can determine how we parent. That's one thing we need to look at. How you respond to a boy versus a girl can be quite different. They have needs that are specific to their gender. Yes, they do. Girls are softer and more emotional, and sometimes, they cry easily, right? They're driven by emotions. Boys tend to be the opposite, right? Therefore, empathy is not always distributed equally, right? It's not always distributed equally because you're meeting the need of that child based on what is happening, right? So the girl may get a little bit more empathy because the tears and the emotions are coming and the tears are flowing and it's stirring the heart of a parent, right? When the boy is firm and strong, doesn't mean that he's not hurting, he's just not responding in the same manner as his sister. This is why it is so important to have both parents. It is important when you have both parents in the same home because we balance each other and we balance the children's needs as well, right? But that is not always the case. But I'm just saying it really is helpful in parenting in a lot of cases when there's both father and mother present. Continuing with, do you relate to one child more easily than you do the other? You may relate to one child because you may relate to that child because that child's personality aligns with yours. That child's personality aligns with yours. And therefore, you may relate to that child in a different way, right? Well, when a child's personality aligns with your own, chances are you are going to relate a lot easier with that child versus a child that is your opposite, a child that challenges you, a child that makes you have to really work hard at being a parent. Right? I mean, those of you who have children, multiple children in your family, some of you should be seeing some of that and experiencing some of that, right? It would be the answer, yes, it would be easier. It's always easier to relate to someone who has the same personality in some cases, right? You can relate to them, right? Sometimes the same personality can cause a clash as well, right? So there's another side to that conversation. But a child who is opposing you and giving you a run for your money, oh, the challenge. Oh, the challenge, right? How you relate to your first child is usually different from the way you relate to your second child. Is usually, listen to the words I'm saying, usually different from the way you relate to your second child, right? Your firstborn usually receives the most focused parental time and attention at first. That's true. Your firstborn, right, gets all of your time and attention at first, especially during the early years, right? However, there are exceptions to this rule as well. Again, that's another conversation. I want to stick to the conversation that we're having now. The intensity of attention may lessen for the children who come after the first child, right? And it gets less and less, more and more children you have, the intensity of your attention may lessen for the children who are coming after and who are coming after, right? Your time and attention is now divvied up. My grandmother has had 13 children. 13. The intensity of her attention will definitely lessen for each children who come after, because there's so much time to divvy up between 13 children, right? It would be for her to give each children the same amount of attention. It would be difficult. Again, based on the fact that these 13 children have different personalities, different temperament, and different needs, right? The excitement of being a parent wears off because it's familiar to you and you know what to expect. The first child, you don't know what to expect. You're all excited, just to be, even to be a parent, to be a mom, to be a dad. You're all excited, right? Not knowing what to expect. Now, this question is going to be a little different from the first question. This question is, do you favor one child more than the other? Not what a child thinks that mom and dad favors. Do you within yourself feel or know that you favor one child more than the other, whether you express it or not? And it would not be wise to express something like that. Ask yourself that question. Take a moment to reflect on that question. Do you, as a parent, favor one child over the others? You may favor one child because of who he or she resembles in features. If the child looks like dad, or if the child looks like you, if the child looks like grandma or auntie or someone in the family, this will influence how you feel. It can influence how, let me just say it can, not will. It can influence how you feel or how you respond to that particular child. Just who they look like, right? It can influence how you feel towards that child. You may favor one child because of his or her intelligence, maturity, obedience, or generosity, versus a child that's disobedient, not ambitious, talks back, and a child that's not generous. Think about that for a moment. I've heard so many parents say, make the statement, or even grandparents make the statement, oh, this particular child is so smart, so intelligent, so wise, so mature for their age. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with recognizing each child's temperament, each child's personality. How we address it or how we say it can affect the other child or the other children listening on. Sometimes we are not even aware that they're listening, right? But most definitely, when you think about it, just from a human perspective, a believer, yes, whether you're a believer or not, we're talking about family here. But from a human perspective. A child that is obedient and generous and mature versus a child that is the disobedience, not ambitious, talks back, not generous. You're gonna it may impact, slightly how you feel towards that child. It may impact. It may impact that. Siblings, no sibling can compete when you really think about it with a firstborn. None. That's not even, it's, you cannot compete with a child that's firstborn simply because they were your first experience of being a parent. And the Bible talks about the importance of the firstborn, actually. The firstborn was considered sacred to God. Numbers 3:11-13. The firstborn, very important. What are some results of favoritism? Or what is perceived to be favoritism? What are some results of favoritism or what is perceived to be favoritism? Favoritism or perceived favoritism can produce sibling rivalry, a disconnect from a parent or both parents. It can produce anger and frustration in a child or in the other siblings. The favored child may feel pressured or guilty, while the other child or the other children may feel insecure or feel a resentment towards you. And we know about the story of Joseph and his brothers, right? That's an example of what can happen when favoritism is perceived or favoritism is true. What is the danger when there's a sibling rivalry or jealousy? What is the danger? It can be harmful emotionally, physically, spiritually to a child who eventually grows up to be an adult. Take a moment to reflect, even on yourself growing up as a child. You may not have children today, but you have had the experience of growing up in a home with other siblings, right? Take a moment to reflect if you experienced any emotional, physical, or spiritual harm while you were growing up in a home with multiple siblings. It can impact the way a child views his or herself. For example, low self-esteem, depression, resentment, poor sibling relationship. That's another. That can last into adulthood. If parents are not being intentional when parenting, they can be serious repercussions. We have to be so mindful and intentional when we are parenting. Parenting is not an easy task, ladies and gentlemen. It is not. Let's look at some biblical examples of what we're talking about here. Some biblical examples. But before that, you're tuned into the Voice of Reason on HGG radio station, Higher Ground Gospel Station. I am Chaplain Ingrid Gentles, and I am your host for today. Our topic, parents, children, and favoritism. That is the topic for today. So let's look at some biblical examples. The Jews are God's chosen people. That's stated in Deuteronomy 7, verse 6. He made a covenant with Israel. They were given a specific mission and responsibility to uphold the divine covenant and demonstrate God's love. They were to be the light unto the nations. Israel. Then we look at John 13:23, where the Apostle John says, he is the apostle who Jesus loved, Jesus favored. John felt that way. There's Isaac and Ishmael, even though with Isaac and Ishmael in the home, the contention wasn't really between the two siblings, but was between the two mothers, right? And it affected the household, right? Genesis 21, verse 10. You can read about that if you are interested in looking at that story in a bit more details for the sake of time. Then we see where God says, Jacob I love, Esau I hated. Malachi 1, 2-3, and Romans 9, 13. To illustrate God's sovereign choice of election. We talked about Joseph and his brothers. Brothers sold Joseph to be a slave out of jealousy and envy and resentment towards their brother Joseph. Genesis 37, verse 12-36. Point of reference for you. Then we're looking at Cain and Abel. Wow, that one is a serious one. Cain killed his brother Abel out of jealousy. Genesis 4, verse 8. Parents. No sibling, know this, no sibling will have the same childhood experience. None. You will not be the same parent to all your children. Not. Each child will stir up a different response from their parents. Yes, they will. Children have different personalities, therefore they will experience and perceive things differently. Even though that might not be what they're seeing, they're perceiving it in a certain manner. It is not that you love one child more than the other, but that they will simply experience you differently. It's not an easy balancing act being a parent. It is not. So my call to action is, as we're coming to close, if you are a parent or parents who are experiencing any of this, just know that you're not alone. Do the best you can to be the best parent you can possibly be, while giving grace and compassion to yourself. You're not perfect. If you are someone who was raised in a household where you felt, you you may not have children right now, or you may do, but if you are someone that was raised as in that type of environment and you are now an adult and you have experienced the pain of going through a sense of feeling not favored, right? I would say to you, remember, parenting is not an easy task. And if the day should come when you become a parent, you will see that parenting is not an easy task. I've heard people say today, I saw the way I grew up in my household, and therefore, because of what I saw and because of what I experienced, I am not going to be like that with my child or my children. And there's nothing wrong with that statement, because you should want to do better than what you experienced or what your perceived experience was. But remember this, I agree. Always, every parent should strive to do better. The next child should strive to do better, and so forth. But remember one thing, keep this in mind. It is not an easy task to be a parent. So I'm going to ask you, in all your reflections, if you can remember to give grace, empathy, and compassion to your parents. That would be a great start to your healing process. Remember, until you become a parent, you will know what is required. Thank you for tuning into the Voice of Reason. I hope this conversation would have helped someone, or where parents all over the world, in every sphere of the world, whether you're a believer or not. This task is not for the faint-hearted. This task is not an easy task. But just remember, do the best you can. And once you've done that, you can be at peace with yourself. Take care. God bless. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye. In a world filled with noise and uncertainty, tune into the Voice of Reason with Chaplain Ingrid Gentles every Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join us for uplifting conversations, inspiring stories, and biblical insights that will empower you to navigate life challenges with faith and confidence, where faith meets reality. Join the conversation on HGG Radio, live on YouTube, and social media. Don't miss it.